Proposition 98, you hear people talk about it a lot. What's the guarantee? What's the Prop 98 level? Prop 98 is essentially a set of formulas that determine the minimum level of funding that California must dedicate to education. And so don't get hung up in the numbers on this chart, but Prop 98 doesn't just pay for K-12 education, it also pays for community colleges, it pays for some preschool and child care activities as well. So there are multiple strings on those dollars, trying to pull them to pay for different things. This chart just shows you some changes the governor's made between his January and May proposal. In January, the governor dedicated about $1.8 billion to deferral buy-downs to districts. Since May, and Ms. Bonilla mentioned, or in May, as Ms. Bonilla mentioned, the governor, there have been new revenues identified in the current year and in the budget year. We, the LAO, have sunnier projections of what those revenues are going to look like, and as a result, the governor made an adjustment to his budget to pay down more deferrals in the current year and fewer deferrals in the budget year. That said, under the governor's trajectory, all deferrals would be paid down by 2015-16. So we are on a path potentially to pay those off. We have Prop 98, and then we have how we allocate Prop 98. The legislature determines how the Proposition 98 funds will be spent. For K-12 education, we pay for that through two primary mechanisms. The first are revenue limits, which are your general purpose monies that districts get to pay for general education for students. And the second are categorical programs. We have about 60 of these. These pay for very specific activities that districts do or pay for, like instructional materials or professional development. Since 2009, about 2/3 of these have been what we call flexed, which means districts could use them for a myriad of purposes, and that was really done to allow districts to respond to declining budgets, as I'm sure you are all painfully aware. Our office, as well as many others, have identified the categorical system as having major shortcomings. It's quite inequitable. Districts receive different amounts for different programs for really irrational reasons. For instance, under the Home to School Transportation Program, you're funded based on what you needed in 1980. Doesn't matter what your enrollment looks like today, doesn't matter if you've moved to a different type of transportation system, you're still getting sort of the same allotment. And if in 1980 you didn't get any transportation money, you're not getting any today. So this isn't the only program that's like this. There are many that are sort of irrational in this fashion. So the governor's original proposal, and I'll talk about the proposal just as the bare bones, since as Ms. Bonilla mentioned, the two houses are starting to try to form their own positions and their own scenarios and options for what this should really look like. But overall, a local control funding formula, as originally proposed by the governor, removes all spending requirements from monies and basically says, district, here's your money based on a formula, based on the characteristics of your district, and we're not going to tell you how you have to spend it. Similar districts would receive similar amounts of funding. There would be a base per pupil rate, and then there would be various add-ons, be it for English learners or low-income students, or class size reduction, or career technical education. These are sort of the major items that would be funded on top of a base rate. There are also a few categorical programs that the governor has left out of the formula, and that the two houses have left out as well thus far. These programs tend to serve very specific student populations or have particular federal or state requirements around them that would prohibit them from becoming flexible items. These include special education, child nutrition, assessments, these sorts of things. So these programs are all going to remain as they currently exist outside the formula, and all of the requirements around those are being maintained. So this is sort of the basic structure of what the governor proposed in January. The basic structure really didn't change. He had four base rates for four different grade spans, a 35% supplement off of those base rates for English learners and low-income students. And as Ms. Bonilla mentioned, that's an unduplicated count under the governor's proposal. So Any students who qualified as both of those characteristics would only be generating one supplement for the district. The governor also proposes concentration funding. So what that means is that for every student a district has enrolled above the 50% threshold that qualifies as an English learner or low-income student, that student would generate an additional supplement to the district. And I have a slide that explains that a little better next, since that can be a little confusing. There would also be 2 supplements for grade spans, one for class size reduction and one for career technical education. And then the governor leaves 2 very large categorical programs alone and adds them as add-ons that don't really count against their formula at the end. These 2 programs are the Targeted Instructional Improvement Block Grant, otherwise known as TIG, and the Home to School Transportation Program. So this slide explains the way the formula works more generally pretty nicely. So you'll see that this is for let's say a kindergarten district with only 10 kids. There are a few of those in the state, amazingly. And so each one of those students, you can see, would generate a base rate of about $6,300. In addition, you can see the dark blue students, there are 7 of those. They would each generate the first supplement of about $2,200 for their district. And then those 2 students above the 50% threshold, that 6th and 7th student, would generate the concentration supplement as well for their district, another $2,200 per student. Is that clear for everyone? Okay. Great. So when people talk about the concentration grant, that's what they mean. Wherever the threshold is, they're setting it, that's where it starts in terms of eligibility. So if you, yeah?
So this is the unduplicated version?
This is an unduplicated version, yes, exactly. So if this were a duplicated version and all of those students were both English learners and low-income students, then there would be 14 students in the district that would be eligible for the supplement, and then there would be 9 students that would be eligible for the concentration grant, because it would be 9 students above the 50% threshold in the district. So under a duplicated count, it is feasible, as currently envisioned, to have a concentration in a district above 100%, because if all of your students are English learners or low-income students, you can get above 100. Okay, so a couple other things. The governor also has some accountability measures surrounding his proposal, as does the assembly plan as well. The governor requires that every district develop local control and accountability plans within which they would have to describe how they're going to meet the needs of their students. They do an analysis of student achievement, these sorts of things. These plans would be less about how well did you do and should we intervene in the district, and more about transparency for the community and the district, so that the community members yourselves could know, well, how is my district planning to spend all this supplemental money that they're receiving? What are they going to do with it? And then most recently in May, the governor proposed an academic accountability system, which I think you're going to hear about a little later. It parallels the fiscal accountability system we currently have. And then lastly, the governor's proposal, when fully implemented, would cost about $62 billion. That's more than we have today. And so, as a result, we'd have to transition to this new system over what the governor estimates a period of about 7 years. It would take about 7 years to get to this full implementation of this new formula. So that would be 2019-2020. So these are our recommendations. I'll skip over these. I believe they're in your handout. We can talk about them in more detail. Many of them are technical. The biggest one, I think, or 2 biggest ones I'll just highlight for you, are that we have recommended and the Assembly has adopted thus far, that the additional monies generated for low-income students and English learners be used to supplement their education and not used to augment general education activities. So for those of you who are active in the education community, this is a supplement and not supplant provision, so that these students would actually have to be receiving services over and above what students in just the general education program would be receiving. And then our second recommendation is to move the Targeted Instructional Improvement Block Grant and the Home to School Transportation category